Maria had always believed her life was perfect. She and João had been married for 3 years, and their lives in São Vicente were simple but happy. Their home was a small, cozy cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by dense forest. João worked as a carpenter, and Maria spent her days tending to the house, baking bread, and dreaming of starting a family. But over the past few months, João had started to change. At first, it was little things: a distant look in his eyes, an unusual coldness in his touch. Maria told herself it was just stress from work, but the unease in her heart grew with each passing day. One night, Maria was awakened by a noise in the middle of the night. She turned over in bed, expecting to find João asleep beside her, but his side of the bed was empty. Her heart pounded as she listened to the creaking floorboards in the hallway. She called out his name, but there was no answer. Summoning her courage, she slipped out of bed and followed the sound. Maria found João in the kitchen, standing in the dark, his back to her. He was muttering to himself, the words too soft to make out. She reached out to touch his shoulder, but something stopped her. A sharp, metallic smell hung in the air. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she saw the knife in his hand, the blade glinting in the dim light. "João," she whispered, her voice trembling. He turned slowly, and Maria gasped. His eyes were wild, unrecognizable, filled with an intensity that terrified her. He stared at her for a long moment, then smiled, a smile that sent chills down her spine. "Go back to bed, Maria," he said softly. "I'm just taking care of something." Too frightened to question him, Maria nodded and backed out of the kitchen. She hurried back to their bedroom, locking the door behind her. She sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm her racing heart. What had she just witnessed? Who was this man she had married? The next morning, João was back to his usual self, gentle, loving, as if nothing had happened. But Maria couldn't shake the image of him standing in the kitchen, the knife in his hand. She decided to keep a closer eye on him, to watch for any other signs of the man she had seen in the dark. As the days passed, João's behavior became more erratic. He would disappear for hours at a time, returning home with no explanation. He was short-tempered and secretive, often locking himself in his workshop late at night. Maria's fear grew, but she was too afraid to confront him directly. She needed to know what was happening to her husband, so she began to investigate on her own. One evening, after João had left for one of his mysterious outings, Maria went into his workshop. She searched through his tools, his papers, but found nothing unusual. Just as she was about to give up, her foot caught on a loose floorboard. Curious, she pried it up and found a small, hidden compartment beneath the floor. Inside was a bundle of old newspaper clippings, each one detailing a series of brutal murders in the surrounding towns. Maria's blood ran cold as she read the headlines. The victims were all women, their bodies found mutilated in the same way. And each article mentioned a suspect, someone the police had never caught. The description was vague, but the resemblance to João was unmistakable. She dropped the clippings, her hand shaking. Could it be true? Could João really be the killer? She had to leave, had to get away before it was too late. But as she turned to flee, she heard the front door creak open. Panic surged through her as she realized João was home. She quickly replaced the floorboard and rushed out of the workshop, trying to appear calm. João was in the kitchen, unpacking a bag of groceries. "You're home early," she said, forcing a smile. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "The job finished sooner than expected," he replied, his voice calm, but with an edge that made her skin crawl. Maria nodded, her mind racing. She needed a plan, a way to escape without raising his suspicions. She decided to act as if everything was normal, hoping to buy herself some time. But that night, as she lay in bed beside him, she knew she couldn't wait much longer. Over the next few days, Maria quietly made preparations to leave. She packed a small bag and hid it in the closet, planning to slip away while João was at work. But João was watching her more closely than she realized. On the night she planned to escape, Maria waited until she was sure João was asleep. She crept out of bed and grabbed her bag, trying to be as quiet as possible. But as she reached the door, A hand clamped down on her wrist. "Where do you think you're going?" Joao's voice was low, dangerous. Maria's heart pounded in her chest. She turned to face him, her voice trembling. I need some air." Joao's grip tightened, his eyes narrowing. "You were going to leave me, weren't you?" Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. For a moment, Joao said nothing, just stared at her with those cold, calculating eyes. Then he smiled, that same chilling smile from the night in the kitchen. "You're not going anywhere, Maria," he whispered. "You belong to me." He pulled her back into the room, his grip unrelenting. Maria fought against him, but he was too strong. He dragged her down the hallway, towards the basement, a place she had never been allowed to enter. "No, João, please." Maria begged, tears streaming down her face. But Joao didn't respond. He opened the basement door and shoved her inside. She tumbled down the stairs, landing hard on the cold, concrete floor. Dazed, she looked up to see Joao standing at the top of the stairs, the door slowly closing. "You'll be safe down here," he said softly, his voice eerily calm. "I'll take care of everything." With that, the door slammed shut, plunging Maria into darkness. She screamed, pounded on the door, but no one could hear her. She was trapped side by side with a